Another Monday runway. You just got to start the days off, right? Monday's always that tough day. You get up, you have to get on the runway, you have to get your checklist and start working out. And that's really why I'm going to start doing this and having some fun doing it. Because I want to make sure that everybody has their voice. And when they hear their voice, man, that's where the power comes into it. And once you hear it on a Monday runway, if you hear live, hit live. Uh, Wherever you ping a message, I'm going to try to track it down. I'm trying to keep it all going and making it happen. So by finding our voice, let me just quickly go through it. Uh, I've seen the analytics first. I'll let you know we're growing, man. We're growing. First episode was a little shaky, and now we're just getting more and more. Last week's episode got a lot of views. Not a lot of comments, but it's a lot of views. So I'm really glad for everybody who just spent any part of their Monday as they're getting ready to take off for the week, right? It's our heart knows when it's our time to soar. It's your time to soar, to be that leader, to be that person who starts really speaking up and knowing how to handle your things, right? So today we're going to talk a little bit about not only becoming a leader for yourself, but the leader and to know the science. When did you stop using your real voice, right? A lot of times we don't even know what our real voice is. Our voice is the voice that we know who we are, that needs to be communicated out there. And that's part of the challenge, is that a lot of leaders, a lot of people in senior positions, as well as just people starting out, don't know. They want to follow somebody else. They want to follow that voice. They want to do that voice that somebody else has. And what I would say to you, think about, when did you learn to stay quiet? Or when did you learn to perform? When did you learn to say it was time to be you? And when did you decide to be accepted, mattered, or being authentic? There's a big difference between all those things, because when you start doing that, there's a little power in knowing your most authentic voice. So a lot of people know that I always talk about authenticity, but being an authentic leader and being an authentic person really is powerful, because that's who you are. They know who you are and they act who you are, because it's the story that shaped our voices. Your past creates your leadership operating system. So we always talk about operating systems. It's a plan. An operating system is a plan on how things go. And as we develop roles, as we grow, I'm growing more and more. So, just this past weekend, I mentioned that in the 2 months that I've been through this little heart scare, I reduced 17 pounds. And and I got a lot of negative things, I got a lot of positive things, but the negative things were offline, right? So people were like, "Oh, yeah, you're taking the shot." Nah, man, this is all natural. I believe in shots. I believe in medicine. I believe in science. And that's where we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. Not about shots. We're going to talk about the science of us, how we perform. Excuse me. You know, because our past performances are actually some of the things that lead to our present managing. And when we're able to do that, that's where the power comes into. Just trying to look at everybody. There we go. And that's the real performance, is really when we develop our roles, right? We all have different roles. How many of you might be the performer, right? I need to impress people, I need to show off. And a lot of times people say that that's what I need to do, and I'm like, no, I don't want to impress anybody. If I'm impressing you, that's great, that's awesome, but I want to show up. And a lot of times in my life was the next category, was the fixer. I need everybody to be okay. For a long time, I used to say it didn't matter if I had a good time, but did everybody else have a good time? And when I learned some of those things, that's where the extra power really turned into something for me, is when I didn't have to fix everything. When I did the best that I can do on a Monday or any other time, that's where the real power comes into, is having the ability to find it, do it, and really keep growing through that. So you don't have to be a fixer or the controller, right? A lot of times as a leader, what we'll do is we'll not let go, right? We have to be the one in charge. We have to be the one. And then, I can't let anything go wrong. Things are going to go wrong. Not everything goes to plan. My grandfather used to say, men make plans and God laughs. sometimes the best laid plans, but if you are able to handle those changes, those things that go through us, that is going to be powerful. That's where leadership really starts showing off. And then, then there's some invisible leaders, right? It's safer not to be seen. I've spoken to a lot of you guys over the past couple of weeks because a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm loving what you're saying. Well, why don't you say something like that? Nah, I can't do that. All right. That's all right. You lead the way that you need to lead. There's no judgments here because, that's one of the things. You have to do what you feel is right, and, when we start talking questions about ourselves, you know, what story about yourself did you inherit or are you still living? Now think about that. There's a lot of stories as we grow up. There's stories about what do you do? Who are you? And that's a real big question. It's a deeper question as much, do you have to be perfect? You know, are mistakes dangerous? What happens when you make a mistake? Asking for help is weakness. Success equals my value. No, your value is your value. Success is just something that you've built along the lines. And that's what I want everybody to be thinking about on these Monday runways is we want to start off the week real well. I'm going to be teaching you some of the things that I do with my executive coaching as well as other coaching that I do. It's really in terms of training. It's not coaching. It's coaching you send in plays. I'm a trainer. I know how to get people to where they need to go, and I want to make sure that you get to where you need to go. We have too many things in this world that distract us, and people tell us what we should do, or I know better. Look, I'm going to tell you, try not to follow the shiny objects. I've done it, and I'd love to help people not follow more shiny objects and have some real conversations. Anybody wants to have a real conversation on anything that I say or do, I'd love to have that. That's fun stuff for me because I learn. So it's not that I'm always right, because I'm not, but I am always willing to listen. So one of the key points that we do about our voice is you can't communicate from a stressed state. And there's times that we do that. There's times I still do that, right? In that moment, you get a little stressed, you get a little conversation in your head, or you get so emotional. Emotions are good, but it's when we can control our emotions, when we know what we're doing, when we're able to breathe. Look, I've been on stages a lot, and there's times I'll get emotional on stages. There was a stage last year. I was there and I saw, one woman in the crowd, and she looked like my mom, and it just was her face. And I needed a few seconds, when you don't expect it. My mom's transitioned, and seeing where you thought your mom, and you always want your mom there. For those who don't know, I carry my mom's fingerprint. I have a little fingerprint that I created of my mom for my mom, so she's always with me a lot of times because it's the regulation. It's when a dysregulated leader does those reactive decisions, the defensive conversations. That's why I want to have conversations. I love having conversations. You don't have to agree with me, but love having those conversations because it also teaches me how to listen, teaches me what I need to do to learn what responses I have and what triggers. Because once there's a trigger, I'm able to learn how to manage it so much better. And those are the power pieces. Um, and also by carrying all those things, it actually carries us so much more, and it really becomes an emotional exhaustion. Now, wouldn't it be better uh, to not be exhausted because it's draining? I didn't know how much of my past life, all the emotional baggage I was carrying, was draining, and what made me have less good decisions because I was just reacting. But a regulated leader, I got to tell you, the power in that is it builds clarity, trust, connection, and confidence. I get more stronger the more that I do these things. And all these things, people don't need to hear me. They do need to hear me. And there we go. All right. I'm trying to manage comments as well. This is the fun part. And so then there's a 90-second reset, with breath resets. So one of the things I do is when I try to not I try I do I train people on, you got to watch your breath, because when we get into those moments of unclarity or stress, we start breathing differently. And, you know, takes 2 short inhales through your nose. Just go, and a long exhale. You repeat that 3 or 5 times, it will start resetting yourself. It'll reset your nervous system. It's all science that goes behind it. And it's a training when you start recognizing what really hits you that much harder. Because you get change your state before you tell your story. And that's what a lot of times people don't do. When you become a motivational speaker, when you become a speaker, people go, "No, I'm not scared on stage." Well, I'm not scared on stage, but right before, I love that little moment, that get ready energy, right before you get out on the field in ball, when you get out, or it's between you and the golf clubs. There's, people that I've worked with, and I'm like, just take that little breath, enjoy that moment. And when you can do that, that's where it really becomes powerful. All those things, because you start aligning your heart and your brain. Before important conversations, hand over your heart. That's where some of the emotions are. I'm a heart on the sleeve type of guy, but I've learned when I need to have big conversations, I need to take the heart out a little bit of it. Always want your heart in it because that's part of who you are, but you don't want to be too emotional. You don't want to be too reactive, and ask, what outcome do I want to create? The outcomes that we have are the outcomes that do get created, and not reaction. The negative, the flip side is, what reaction do I want to avoid? Yeah, you don't want to start to be loud and things like that, but that becomes the training. I learned that. It was one of those things that when you experience it, it becomes so much more powerful, because when we start having those conversations on with ourselves at the beginning, it has to start with you. And that's why when I train executives and people to work on their voice and what their voice is. So it's not only about leaders, but it's the identity resets. Before walking in the rooms, I want everybody to think, not how can I impress them? I don't think how I can impress them. I wear a whole bunch of different outfits, and I don't look for impressing somebody. I want to impact somebody when I talk to them. I want to ask how I can serve them, right? It's not about me. Most of this stuff is not about me, and because it's your life, your message, your training. And one of the things that we talk about is, really how most people build their reputation around protection. Oh, I don't want people to know about that. Look, I'll tell you anything you want to know about my life. Been divorced, been, suicide attempt. I have lots of failures, but I also have lots of successes. And even this past month, I really started embracing some of my corporate successes. Running budgets of $100 million, working with some of the biggest lawsuits in the IP world. Man, I didn't think about that, but I was part of those teams. And that's how I knew how to lead and really take on some things that were really important, because a lot of times it's the mask we wear. And I knew what mask, I knew I could step into all the things I do. What mask do you wear? I'd love you to think about that and try to have some conversations around that. The mask I wear is, I'm always strong. I know what I want to say. Can I be shaken from it? Yeah, you could explain to me. You could educate me, and I could change some things. But I'm always available. That's part of my mask, right? It's a safe space. That's what that Uncle Dave nickname comes from. It's just that safe space, that heart centered leader. You know, am I always right? No, I'm not, but I'm now in control. That's where the power really comes. And the messages, because the messages I'm telling you right now, the messages I've learned is, what have I learned? I've learned who I was in the past wasn't the person who I thought I was. And now I still have room for improvement. But I know when I'm training people, I see that spark in their eye, that love. When I get somebody to have a story, when I get them to write their story and see it through their eyes, that they didn't think about it. And that's the power. Getting somebody on stage who didn't think that they can be on stage, always wanted to be on stage, but to not only be on stage, but impact the audience. Being on stage is so important, but it's so much more. That's why we align our voices with who we are and how we do things. It becomes that much more powerful. And, who are you going to help? Who do I want to help? I help executives train to be better executives. I also help people to write books. That's why with my entrepreneur friends, I help people align their message. I do a deep dive in branding. I know who I help. And it's that whole thing is this alignment of it, because that's really the truths that I've learned. I've done things. It's not just I'm saying things because I read a book. I've lived everything that I teach. I have lived in a way that has been high level, Fortune 50 companies, $100 million, cases, $1 billion cases. I mean, the cases that I've helped defend and work that I've done has been $1 billion companies and $1 billion products for those companies. So, never really thought of it that way. And then somebody had said, "Well, let's talk about it." And when you still always will refine yourself, because that's the voices of leadership. That's the voices we have. There's a lot of times we'll operate from a wounded voice, where we speak out of fear, where we had to prove ourselves, and even a little protection, because not everybody wants to hear the story that we want to tell. But the real answer to that is because we're the wounded voices are really because of what will people think. Once you get that power inside of yourself to be your most authentic self, it doesn't matter what people think, what people know. It matters that you know for yourself, and that's where the real power is, because that's where the authentic voice lives in. It speaks from values. Nobody can question my values. You might not agree with all the things that I say. That's okay. But that's a conversation, because maybe you can educate me on a new part, or I'll educate you on some truths. But through that experience, that's part of that authentic voice that I want everybody to have and speak out there. That it's not enough in the coaching space. Everybody wants to be glitzy and show off their shiny things. But I want you to have purpose. I want you to leave impact, not impact that's just like, oh, okay, that's nice until the next thing. What needs to be said? That's what I always said. That's how I got into trouble a couple of weeks ago. I needed to be said something, and went over well. A lot of people behind the scenes were like, "Man, that was great. I love what you were saying. You were calling out these people." I'm like, "No, I wasn't calling about anybody. It was a lot of people. It wasn't just one thing. We got to be who we are. And if you're really upset with things, get out there and speak about it. I want to give everybody the power on my shows, on my things, to hear the power, because it's the power. That's where you're most authentic. That's what people want to hear. They want to hear you. They don't want to hear what somebody else thinks or Chat GPT thinks, because that's what creates a legacy voice. It's the contribution, it's the wisdom, it's the impact. And that's what legacy is. Because legacy is the things we teach our kids. Legacy is the thing that we teach. Who needs to know what I have learned? And I didn't think for a long time, I thought I was only going to teach one thing, but training the obvious of how to act and how to reset yourself, how to overcome some of the traumas. Those are my specialties, because that's really what comes into every part of our lives. It's the living part of our lives. Now, there's a lot of exercises, and if anybody reaches out, I'll give them the flight sheet for today, right? When a pilot gets ready to take off, he has a flight sheet, checks off all those things. I'd love for everybody to get in touch with me and find out what their flight sheet is and give them a little bit of a map. That's not a charge. That's not a pitch for anything, because I want you to know in one sentence, I want you to answer these for yourself. And, it's, I used to believe X. What did you used to believe? Life taught me blank. Now I help and create and lead by how do you do it? Now, an example like could be, I used to believe strength meant never struggling. We talk about that, but really struggling is part of the action. It's how you keep doing it. If you keep struggling through the same things, that's the challenge, is not being able to struggle through those things, because that's the real lesson here, is learning exactly what we need to do to get through ourselves. And hey, another, exercise could be another example could be, life taught me strength through my misunderstanding myself. You know, understanding yourself that much more knows who you are. That's why it's a conversation everybody needs to have with themselves to really turn themselves on, because it's the strength that you learned by understanding yourself. Why did you react the way that you did previously that you might not be doing now? And now, one of the things I would say is now I lead by creating spaces where others can become themselves. That's my goal. That's one of those things that I want to make sure that everybody who's in my circle does. They lead by creating spaces that they can be themselves, but not only be themselves, but lead for other things. It's not about just getting on stages, it's not about telling a story. Those are powerful things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not undercutting those things. But as a leader, I want you to not only hear my voice, I want you to take action for yourself. Because when you take action for yourself, you're set to take off and it's your time to soar. But that's where we're going to start going. And that's really where I'm going to end is you've just remember your voice was never lost. It was buried beneath everything that you learned that you needed to become to survive. However you coped through survival at that moment, that was the important part. Leadership begins when you stop protecting the image and start sharing the truth. I don't like all the truths that I've had to live through, but I got to tell you, I've learned through them all. And all the things that I did to get me here, that's the power that I want to share with everybody and give them that power. That's the legacy that I want to do. I want people to know is not only I got a group of people together, I want to make sure that each person became that much stronger, because that's what a Monday runway is we get on the runway together and we might all fly different directions. We might all have those powers within ourselves, but I know that if you really dive deep into your heart, you'll know when it's your time to soar. That's me for today. Have a great day. Have a great Monday. Keep going. And I'd love to talk to anybody who wants any of the checklist, the flight checklist for this week or any other week.